This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 157.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode as Bini is moving his camera and getting me dizzy. I am your host, Ramsey, the complainer, Majaba, I guess. I just complained. I don't think I'm a complainer, but I feel like I complain about the beard a lot. And with me is my co-host, Benny, the Magic Beard Kunungu.
Hello. Honestly, you're not alone over there. I think probably the vast majority of people that I interact with or work with at my job say the same thing.
Just so you know, I didn't say magic beard as a compliment. I think you might be hiding a bunny underneath there somewhere.
Oh no, there is. It's spring. I mean, I need to find a place for the birds to nest in, and I try to help out any way I can. You know,
that's mighty kind of you. All right, so we don't have a guest today. It's just you and me, and we're talking about the top 10 uncommon mistakes that I've seen in interviews. I've seen and I've done in interviews. So just to correct that, we'll share some funny stories about that. And you know, we're talking about this. I do have a course that I mentioned, I think a while back. It's called The Road to Sales Engineering, where we help non-SEs understand what the interview process is and all that. So this is the course is open, but this specific podcast, this could be useful for anyone who's about to do an interview. And it's useful for me because I get to think about these things, and no one ever thinks about their interviews until they're about to do the next one, at which point they forgot every interview they've been in. So we don't practice enough.
I agree. And a lot of these skills too, and we'll go into them obviously as the show goes on, but I feel like a lot of the things that we're going to end up talking about today even apply beyond just interviews too sometimes. Like even just in certain interactions with certain types of people, or if you feel like maybe there's maybe as naturally there is an interview is to be there for there to seem like there's a power imbalance between the interviewer and interviewee. If you ever feel like, and that isn't necessarily the case, but if you ever feel like that, I guess, is a dynamic in any sort of conversation that you're having, I think some of the skills and some of the things that we're going to talk about, even with respect to just, making yourself better at interviews, will even just make yourself a better conversationalist in those types of situations.
Yeah, just to point out, and I think I'm preaching to the choir, I think sales engineering has the most transferable skills into real life in general, because sales engineering is dealing with humans, and so is real life. So you want to negotiate to buy a car, a house, whatever, sales engineering helps you do that. You want to solve problems, sales engineering helps you do that. You want to debug stuff. That's why I love sales engineering, because it's so real life. Not like I used to work in support at Alcatel-Lucent. Not many skills I learned in support at Alcatel-Lucent supporting a specific product would help me in real life, other than like you have to have patience. Beyond that, you have to have patience and don't trust the customer, always verify. Not that the customer is trying to tell you like mistruths, but sometimes they don't know everything. For example, I think I'm going off on a tangent, but whatever. We do routers, and you have like a bunch of routers connected together, and we were seeing issues. I asked the customer, are the two routers we're seeing problems with, are they directly connected with? He's like, yes. And that was like my first half year on the job, and I couldn't figure it out. So I called my supervisor, and I came in. I don't know what's happening. He's like, are they connected together? I'm like, the customer says yes. Verify. I verified they were not connected together. 5 minutes later, I had solved the problem. So I don't think the customer's intention was to lie, or not tell the truth, but that's what happened. Anyway.
Well, just even piggyback off that real quick, like, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that whole sentiment about the customer being right always, like, I don't know. I think everybody needs to work in some sort of a support or service role at some point in their life, just to kind of like get two things. One, a sense of how to treat people in those roles, but also, get the insight to know that, yeah, the customer isn't always right. And you know what? Sometimes it's just dumb, but you got to be like nice and put a smile on and all that for those people and make them not feel that way. But you know what? You could feel all right knowing that they're not always right.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to make them feel stupid about it. You just have to kind of verify what they said and then explain why it was incorrect. Maybe they misunderstood the question. Maybe it was your fault. You didn't ask the question properly too, right?
Sure. I'm thinking of a time when I was working in a restaurant, and we had a lot of people that would say they have certain allergies, and then those allergies would not be the case at all. But yeah, sorry, I'm jaded from those times. Good time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. All right, we're going we're going way too deep off on a tangent. Anyways, the course is open. The Road to Sales Engineering. Check it out. You can go onto weditses.com, and there is a courses tab. You can check it out there. Also, I have a course with Chris White. I feel like I'm just pitching area and like doing a shameless plug for everything I do. I have a course with Chris White that's also open, Sales Engineer Mastery. So check that out as well if you're already a sales engineer and looking to mastery your sales. And
I love how you cover the gamut. Get people into sales engineering through the road to sales engineering, and then get them to be as best they can be at it through the mastery course. So kind of cool. It's something for everyone.
All right, let's talk about the 10 non-common interview mistakes. And I wanted to say non-common because I didn't want to talk about like, hey, have some tidy clothes on or be prepared, because although we might say some of these mistakes and you might think duh, but it's either I've seen them happen or I've done them myself. So let's go with number one. And this could be the most duh question, or mistake, with not pausing to make sure you answered the questions that they were asked. And this has happened to me where I'm interviewing an experienced SE who's been around for years, and I ask a question about A, he answers about B, and in the end, he just, once he's done, he's like, all right, I guess we'll move on from here, because he just talked for a half hour about something I didn't ask. And I checked out at that point too. So I stopped asking meaningful questions. I was just trying to speed up the situation. Has that ever happened to you, Vinny?
So I think not so much in interviews, but like definitely in life. I naturally speak quickly, and I sometimes, once I'm a little bit more thoughtful about it, I tend to let my mouth run a little faster than my brain. So that definitely causes some issues here and there for sure. And like there'll be times when I'll be starting to say something, and I realize partway through that that's not the right thing I should be saying, and I should be saying something else entirely. And then it's kind of a weird pivot, but I'm kind of a weird person, so it's pretty natural, I suppose. But knowing that though, like I've had to practice quite a bit, I suppose, to do exactly what you're talking about, kind of taking pause, fully understanding the question. And the interview environment isn't necessarily one that isn't stress-free. So like people that are maybe more likely to get nervous and anxious and be very quick with their answers and speak quickly, maybe naturally, are going to be even more so, or are going to do so even more, or will have the inclination to do so even more during an interview, I believe, or at least in my experience. And so being very cognizant to have a question be asked, pause, even repeat the question back to the interviewer, all gives you time to think, compose your thought, and come out with a semi-articulate answer, at least on topic. And then even if you want to change your answer partway through because you realize maybe there's a better way to say it after you do, that's fine. At least you haven't checked out, because at least their first response is still relevant to the question.
Yeah. And for that specific one that I'm thinking about that's happened to me, like I thought I made like body language gestures that you're not answering my questions, and he just didn't take the hint. So yeah, kind of you have to read the person you're talking to, even if it's on the phone. If you're like it's so hard to read people on the phone, but sometimes you hear people trying to interrupt, and you kind of ignore them and keep going just because you have something to say. You thought of something smart and you have to say it, but you don't really have to say it. If it's smart but doesn't answer the question, is it really smart?
Although something that makes it as well is that, not always will you, even being with the best intentions in mind, maybe you still go down that path of answering the wrong question because you maybe are just too quick, and then you realize, oh shoot, like there was that one podcast I listened to, or Bini and Ramsey were talking about like taking your time with it, and I forgot to do that, and I'm already, partway through the sentence I'm saying. If you feel sometimes that, or if you recognize that you may not be answering the question that they asked, if you kind of see them starting to disengage a little bit, I've in the past even kind of taken pause myself and just said, hey, like kind of check myself and say, hey, this is kind of like where I'm going with this. But I'm realizing, is this even the question that you were asking? Just that way you could get confirmation from them, and you could change directions. Sometimes they may even want you to go down that tangent that you were going, because it kind of allows them to see into your brain a little bit, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. But yeah, making sure that you are actually answering what they're asking for is critical, without a doubt.
Yeah, like giving them the option to continue. Like, that's happened to me before. It's happened to guests on the podcast as well. where they start answering the question and then they catch themselves, maybe I'm not answering the question, and they pause and say like, am I on the right track? Is that the question that you were asking? And my response is usually like, hey, I don't, like, please answer whichever question you want because this is fun. But when you're talking to a hiring manager or an SE, or maybe someone like me who's a little bit of a, on the pessimist to optimist scale, I'm more of a realist towards pessimist. Like, I'm looking for a reason to cut you out, honestly, because that's what a lot of customers do. Like, it's easy to deal with the easy customers. The hard customers are harder to deal with. So I'm trying to be kind of take the worst common denominator, which is usually the bad customer. I putting my phone on mute. Bad mistake, Ramsey. Bad mistake. Anyways, yeah.
Just
So
one more thing about that, if that's okay. Sometimes too, you might feel that you're maybe taking too much time between them asking the question, and maybe even repeat it back to them, and you really want to compose your thoughts a little bit. I've taken definitely don't just, it's not a negotiation, like don't stay silent until they make the next sound per se, but all the while, or at least I've gotten away with the idea of kind of collecting my thoughts, taking pause, and if nothing is coming to me, or like a coherent sentence isn't coming to me right away, but I have a whole lot of thoughts in mind, I'll even just tell them that too, and kind of give them a brain dump of the sense of that, like that's a really good question. I'm thinking about it, and I don't really have a solid thought, but let me try and take you like where my thoughts are going right now. And that way you could kind of like give them a window into your head and into your thought process, which may even then lead to the actual answer that you intended to from the beginning, or otherwise that they would like to see, even if it wasn't a specific thing. So just making sure you're answering the question, and making sure you're giving yourself the best shot. And don't get too down on yourself if you feel like you're taking longer than you feel like you should. I don't know, I guess all goes towards better.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of brings us to, well, I have it on the list as number 3, but these are not in ordered. So let's just go there. The second mistake here. Let's just renumber it. The second mistake here is that you actually think this is an interview, but it's more of a conversation. Even if someone asks you a question, you can ask a question in return to clarify, right? It's the best interviews I've had, or the most successful interviews I've had, were not interviews, we're conversations with the hiring manager, with the SE. Like, hey, we're just talking about life in general. Like, what is life as a sales engineer at your company, right? That has led to kind of good relationships as well, outside of just talking business. And so have conversations. Don't think of it as an interview only. It's a conversations, and you get to ask your questions as well. I don't like to wait till the end to ask my questions. I like to, when I get to the end and they ask me like, hey, do you have any questions for me? It's like, you know what? We've been having this conversation for like half hour. I've asked all my questions, if I can't think of any on the spot. So what do you think?
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And it kind of harkens back to one of Chris's habits, if I'm not mistaken, for highly successful sales engineers. I think it's a habit, but just the idea of teamwork, I suppose, about partnership. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like, if you're able to have a good conversation with those that you're interviewing with, it's probably a good sign that if you guys had a working relationship together as well, then, things wouldn't be awkward. If maybe you're stuck on a plane together, or in a boardroom together, working on a deal, it's important to have rapport with the people that you're working with. And so to be able to show that you're able to build that rapport with somebody right then and there is a pretty good sign that you're going to be able to continue that, if you actually, got hired or whatever it is. So yeah, the importance of just kind of remembering it's a conversation is so important. I think that one, it makes you feel more comfortable, but also two, it gives them insight to the fact that yes, this person's going to be a good player on the team, maybe even regardless of what they actually know technically.
Yeah, and it's kind of like discovery calls. When you're doing a discovery call with a customer, you don't want to be interrogating the customer, right? And I've been through discovery calls where I'm listening to some guy who has a checklist, and they're just going through the checklist, asking this question, that question, and that leaves no room for conversation. So it is, and the interview, it's a two-way discovery. It's the same as the sales process. You're discovering with a customer, the customer is discovering about you. The interview, you're discovering about them, they're discovering about you, which kind of also leads us to the third point, is forgetting that you're interviewing them as well. It's not just them interviewing you. You want to make the decision if you want to work for them in the end. And Bini's doing funny faces. He must have closed the list.
Oh, no, it's not that. I live in I'm sure, I don't know if people even hear it on the show or not, but I live right by a pretty busy street. And so there's a lot, especially as the weather gets nicer, a lot of street racers and motorcycles that go by that rev their engines right around here-ish. And so I try to always go on mute whenever that happens.
We hear it sometimes, but not all the time. But yeah, like basically forgetting to answer the two that you're interviewing them. It's much easier if you already have a job, or if you're not desperate to leave your old job. Right? Like if you're in a toxic environment, you know, and you don't have as many options. If you have one interview set up, oh, here, okay, we'll add that as a bonus. Let me keep talking while I'm writing.
Yeah,
Entertain our guests.
for sure. So yeah, for those of you especially that maybe haven't been through many interviews or maybe haven't been in a role, and you're kind of wondering, how do I interview the company back? Well, pretty easy, I guess, in a way. Well, one, feel comfortable with the fact that they're actually going to be expecting it. I don't know if any of y'all have ever ended an interview. I guarantee you, actually, back when I was first doing interviews, like for corporate jobs or whatever, back when I was in school through my co-op program, my first couple interviews, or at least the ones that didn't go very well, are the ones where, I answered all their questions and stuff. And at the very end, I don't know, I had a very limited view on things. I wouldn't really ask many questions back to them. And we would always leave the room kind of like, I would always feel like they were wanting something more out of me, particularly around me asking more questions about them. And so ever since that kind of weird experience, I've always just thought about, okay, like, well, one, what are the questions I could be asking? And two, I hope that that'll make things more comfortable, I suppose, when I leave a room with an interviewer. And in my experience anyways, I found that, well, the number two has definitely been satisfied. And for the whole, like, what type of questions I want to ask, just think about, what would make you happy in that role, or what types of things you would want to know about that role, or what types of things are unknowns with respect to visualizing yourself in that role. And ask about those things, and they'll be happy to tell you, and then you'll have a better sense as to what you're getting yourself into.
One question I used to ask when I did interviews is like, are you happy in that role? Yeah. which kind of like shocks people, because now they're thinking, and they want to sell you on the role, right? So it's not like they can actually be honest about it, but you can tell by the way they talk, so yeah, like just what do you want to know about the company that you can't find out online, right? And I like to ask, hey, how often have you hit your quota over the last 3 years or 5 years, right? How many account managers do you work with? Is it one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? What's the kind of support that they provide in terms of learning or not learning, or whatever you care about? These are the questions that you need to know about them, right? And, go ahead.
I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just like, you can ask the hiring manager one types of questions. You can ask the SE colleagues one type of questions. Like you can ask the account managers. I've asked them like, hey, what are you looking for in an SE? Right. And if they tell me I'm looking for a gopher, I'm like, thank you. See you later. Right. Or if I'm looking for a partner, all right, this is looking interesting. Totally. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I cut you off first. And I think you said something really important there, though, right in the middle, that is super key, which is that you want to ask questions about things that you couldn't find out already, whether it be by looking on their site or otherwise, and couldn't easily find out anyways. Because the last thing you want to do is, I don't know, like ask them a question about something that would pop up immediately when you go on their homepage, because that's going to show not so much that you're curious and inquisitive, but rather that you're actually maybe even lazy and you didn't do your homework with respect to doing your due diligence about the company before you came into it. And it doesn't mean you need to read their financial statements, you need to read their every release that they do with every filing to the SEC or whatever to get insight to their company, though it wouldn't hurt. It just means, do a surface level scan of their site and get a sense of as much as you can just from public resources, even high level ones. And then even ask to elaborate on those during the interview. And as Ramsey said, just ask about the things that are otherwise behind closed doors. Even emotionally, that's the best. And I think the coolest thing about that too is that even if they are working in a company that maybe isn't as amazing as it perhaps could be, or maybe will be after you get hired, is that by gauging how the interviewer responds, you can almost get a sense of the culture there as to how honest they are and how open about being honest that they are. Which even if the company is not doing well, but its leadership is it's filled with good people that have good intentions, that are honest, that have a good path for you, I personally actually would kind of like that, to know that, all right, I'm working with good, genuine people that can make a difference, as opposed to a bunch of sleazebag.
And like, yeah, you said it, like sometimes even if the company is not doing well, or it's like it could be the best, like the most prestigious company in the world that abuses the life out of their employees, would you want to work there? Right? Or it could be a company that's not very well known, but they treat their employees great. Would you prefer to work there? Or it could be that the product is the most interesting product in the world, but you're working 24/7, you're not seeing your family. These are the things that I personally, when I talk to people, I want to know, because I do have a full-time job. I do have kind of a side hustle, if you want to call it that. Well, yeah, I guess you can call it that, since I have courses. And then I have uh, 3 kids, 1 newborn. So I will not work for a company that's expecting me to work 24/7. I don't mind working long hours. I don't mind working like having a peak where you're working like 72 hours straight, and then relaxing for a little bit. So what do you want to know? What is it that you want to know? Ask those questions and go from there, because their answers. And don't think that if once you ask that question, that's it, you're done. No, you can follow up on something they've said, right? Like, hey, I just, why are you hiring? That's a question that I ask. Why are you hiring an SE right now? Oh, we had someone leave right now. Why did they leave? It's not just, okay, someone left and now you move on to the next question. Like, no, why did they leave? Were they unhappy? Why were they unhappy? What made them, like, because it might affect you in the future, right? Or like, hey, where are you hiring right now? Oh, we're growing. Oh, great. How many are you looking to hire in the next few months, years, whatever? So again, it's a conversation. It's not just ask. And kind of Chris talks about that in, I think, one of the webinars or the courses, I can't remember, where it's as if it's in a discovery. It's not a checklist. It's one question leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Once we reach the end point, now we can go back and start another branch of questions.
Love it. And as a sales engineer too, and like for any role, you should be asking questions, but for any sales oriented role, sales engineering obviously included, I wonder, it's probably even a prerequisite to have have the interviewer be asking questions, because like you said, it is a discovery. So I mean, if somebody's going to be good at discovery in the interview, then they're probably not going to be too bad at discovery, in an actual sales cycle. Whereas if somebody just isn't at all doing any discovery, or they ask questions, and even though you leave the door open for a million follow-ups, they just kind of treat it like a checklist and just move on with the list, then an interviewer might be worried. They're like, oh snap, is this person going to be like this in the sales cycle as well? And will we not get as much out of them as we otherwise could? Sure, people can be trained and all that, but just think about it. It is, you are interviewing them, they are interviewing you, but even in your interviewing of them, you are showcasing skills that are required for the role. So
I do want to say something about that. You're correct. If someone's bad in doing a discovery in an interview, they're probably going to be bad at doing discovery in, like, as sales engineers. But if someone does a great discovery in an interview, doesn't necessarily translate to being a great discovery as an SE, mainly because the products are different. In an interview, you're the product, right? And you know yourself. Hopefully, I hope you know yourself, and you're able to ask the questions to help them build a vision of where you can provide them. But like, then you have to go learn a product, which might be a completely different ballgame for you.
nope, 100% agree. Yeah.
All right. So, non-common interview mistake number 4. That's Spanish for 4. Um, it's not following up with the hiring manager. And I'm not talking about not sending thank you messages after the fact. I'm talking about, you did the interview, it's been a week, you haven't heard back, you don't follow up.
And you expected it to be a week, or rather, you expected to hear back from them in a week.
Well, generally my question is, after every, okay, I guess, bonus mistake, at the end of the interview, you don't ask when you expect to hear back.
Yeah. Or just like, what are our next steps, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, what are our next steps? Well, I guess that's also mistake number 5, not asking for the process. Like, what's the interview process here? What do you want to do the next step? Is it, when should I hear back from you? When are you going to make a decision? The hardest part is when now you're one of 3 candidates and you have to do a demo or whatever, and you've done the demo, but the other 2 haven't. And now you're waiting for an answer. You didn't ask when the other 2 are going to be doing the demo, right? When they're going to be making the decision. When is it okay to follow up? right? And you can, if you're not comfortable following up out of the blue, make sure you ask those questions during the interview or at the end of the interview, so they can expect it coming. You're not blindsiding them. And whether you're currently an SE or not, you're trying to become part of a sales team. So follow up is kind of part of the job. You kind of have to follow. You mentioned that you have a hard time with that. Why was that?
Yeah. So yeah, I did mention, so like naturally for sure, like the idea of kind of thanking somebody after an interview. Yeah, like I know everybody's been saying it's a good thing. And yeah, I've just naturally never really done that much. I know that's not what we're talking about with the whole follow-up piece. I want to say once before though, like I have, I'll even get a sense. So sorry, let me back up a bit. The idea of kind of asking about next steps and just kind of asking about, when might be, I tend to ask for like, what are the next steps to expect, as opposed to asking when should I hear back from you, just because like, I don't want to assume necessarily that they're going to reach back out to me in case they have a process where they just ghost people that they don't move ahead with. So I'll rather just ask first for the process. And by asking for what the process is or asking for next steps, they're going to be the ones to kind of give me the timeline to say that, oh, we have like 2 more people to interview or a few more people to interview, should have everything done by the end of the week. And you should be able to hear back from us in the next couple of weeks or so. What I'll then do is, and I won't be super, like, I won't be persistent within that time frame and ask them like, okay, how are things going, like within that time frame. But after that 2 weeks has elapsed and I haven't heard from them, I'll even give them a 2-3 day buffer just to like give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe things are busy or whatever. And then if I haven't heard even after a couple day buffer, after they said that I should, then I'll reach back out to them and see kind of where they're at with things. That's just me personally. And I'm not a natural salesperson, so I'm not like one to necessarily always be asking right on, okay, where are things at? But I will at least want to, for my own peace of mind, want to know kind of where things are at with respect to what they told me, what to expect, and then kind of close the loop myself if I have to, just for my own peace of mind.
So I kind of disagree about. I agree with everything you said. Maybe not the timing of it, or we can tweak it. Like my preference is different, but I like to ask when should I hear back from you, whether I get the job or not, because if you're telling me that if I don't get the job, I'm never going to hear back from you, then I'm going to be waiting in limbo for a while. And I don't want that. I want a no or a yes. So that's usually my go-to. Like, hey, when should I hear back from you? When can I follow up? And if they tell me, oh, we're interviewing 2 more people, we're going to make a decision by Friday. Yeah, that's kind of a debate I have with myself all the time. Should I message them on Thursday? Like, hey, man, you mentioned, are you still on to make the decision by tomorrow? Right? Because I don't want to be the person emailing them too late, reminding them about myself too late too. Right? I want to show some sales skills ahead of time. So I like to, because if they're going to make a decision that's not beneficial to me, I want to have the chance to be able to influence it. Right? So and if they don't want to answer, they don't really have to answer, but it doesn't really hurt me in any way. I just send them a message reminding them that I'm here. If they feel like they want to call me, they can. So that's how I see it, at least.
There you go. Yeah, I wonder. Like, I think I would like to get to that at some point in my life. I don't think I'm there at all yet, but I wonder if that just comes with, I don't know, it comes with more confidence, or comes with just more experience, or less patience on a company or on a hiring manager to do what they said they would, I suppose, and just be proactive.
Well,
I like that a lot. I don't know if I could do that myself right away, but
I think you could. You just have to make the decision that you can.
yeah,
Everybody can do almost anything if they make the decision. Like maybe you can't ride a horse today, but you can at least start practicing riding a horse.
sorry, yeah.
I can't because I'm 300 pounds, but well, maybe the horse can. I don't know. Depends on kind of horse. Maybe not a pony, but actually, yeah. Never.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Go ahead.
yeah, I guess it's not so much that I can't like physically do it. I guess it's more so that I don't know if mentally I want to do that yet personally. But
Well, here's the thing: if you find that it works, you'll start doing it more. Everything is an experiment, and you can try it. If it doesn't work, then you really didn't lose much. But I've seen it work more often than not. Just because, at least work in the sense that, no, sorry, Ramsey, we decided to go with somebody else. We're just telling you a day early, right? Not necessarily I'm getting the job, but at least I know I can move on. Not that I'm waiting, but not that I'm looking right now, but in general, if I were, I wouldn't have to wait. And it's also a sales skill, like something that you need as an SE as well. Oh, you're gonna make a decision by Friday. All right, I'm gonna reach out to you on Wednesday to make sure that I answered all of your technical questions. All right, nothing has changed since last time we talked. I just like to be preemptive. I don't like to wait till they make a decision and then have to change their minds. I'd rather come to them and help influence their minds beforehand. Right.
It makes sense. I think it's really smart. I will say though, I guess actually the one thing I didn't realize, but I'm sure I like deep down realized it. I do think about it now, and I'm sure I did. But the one, at least in my head, benefit of kind of waiting at least till the time that they said has elapsed, and this is probably just for me personally, is that if it allows me to almost judge that person a little bit, so that regardless of like what the result is, if I get the job or not, I feel like depending on how long I guess it's been since they said they were going to respond and they actually do, or what that response contains, given how much time also has elapsed between those two periods, I get a sense as to what that person is like and what that hiring manager is like or what that recruiter is like, which at least in my experience has been pretty accurate even after the fact too, where if somebody says they're going to do something and they don't, and like I'm guilty of this too, it isn't a good thing, but and they don't, I mean, it almost gives you a little bit of an insight with respect to like how on the ball this person sometimes is. And it could almost be a disarming thing too, where if there was somebody that you thought was like the most prim and proper person ever, really on top of everything, and they're like a few days late, or they say they were going to get back to you by a certain day and they don't because something slipped their mind or whatever it may be, it makes them it makes them seem less infallible, which almost humanizes that person a little bit, which can be a benefit for some people.
Yeah. Again, it depends on how badly you want the job.
So fair, yeah.
Right. For me, I see it. It's my responsibility to remind that person. If they forget about me, it's my fault. I let them forget about me.
Interesting.
That's how I see it. But if you were trying to test, it's like me putting food outside the fridge just to see if my wife is going to put it away, and then call her on it. Right.
Well,
it's
who's
it helping?
Well, it's not so much that, because like at least in this case, you do want to hear back from them. At least in my case, like I do want to hear back from them. And ideally it's within the time frame that they put out. But if they did forget about me, I mean, that's kind of telling in its own way too, where it's like, okay, this person forgot about me. How good about that do I feel, I suppose? Like if they try, yeah, I don't know. Like,
do you remember our chat with Emma 3D?
Yeah.
Can't remember. I forgot the gentleman's name.
Everyone's name, but I have his face in my head though.
Yeah, Matt Elsom.
Yeah.
Hope I didn't butcher your name, Matt, if you're listening to this. He basically said he was a customer, and as a customer, he would not he would say, was it the tall guy who talked about this thing, or was it the guy with the beard? Right? People forget. It's in our nature, especially hiring managers when they're, example, hiring in like 5 different locations. They're not going to keep everyone straight, and maybe it is their job. But if I want the job, I'm going to take ownership of trying to get the job. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to try to remember me. I'm going to remind them of myself.
That's the way to go.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to everything's bringing me to the next point. Actually, this doesn't not bring me. Never mind. So mistake number 6 is not asking for contact info after your call with every person you meet. Right? What was that?
I've done this before personally.
Yeah, well, that's why it's an uncommon mistake.
Yeah, that's good.
How do you send them thank you messages after?
You don't.
Well, there's a common mistake.
I wouldn't say it's a mistake not to. It's just a good thing too.
Well, all of these are like kind of, again, there's I think you can go online and Google common mistakes in interviews, and there's going to be a million. These are kind of trying to up your game to the next level.
I would argue though that some of these are mistakes. Like the idea of not asking questions in an interview, like I think that at least nowadays is kind of an expectation that you should be doing that, or the concept of like them being interviewed as well as you were being interviewed. I think like having that realization is, I would imagine anyways, that those are just things that like you should realize.
That's up in your level. I feel like you there's the basic I'm going to answer questions, especially for people right out of university. Like I didn't know what questions to ask. You mentioned that you didn't know what questions to ask. So, this is up in your game. I've done this where I've forgotten to ask for contact info, and afterwards I have to email the recruiter, tell him, hey man, I forgot to ask this person for his contact info. Do you mind forwarding my thanks to them? Right.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I never hear back, so I never know if they actually heard my thanks. It's a small thing that, and I feel I should be talking more about facts and feelings, but I feel they appreciate that. Most SEs in general want to help, right? They enjoy helping. So hey, asking for contact info, just maybe you want to reach out to them later and ask questions or get more information. A lot of SEs actually end the interviews with that, like, hey, if you have any more questions, let's just reach out to me. Okay, how? I forgot to ask you that question. I can never reach out to you now. So it's not a mistake. It's up in your level, if you want to call it that. So ask for contact info at the end of each call, and send them an Uber Eats gift card or something if you want.
Definitely up your game. It will definitely separate you from the crowd. I will say I do send thank yous after I hear if I hear back from a job and I get declined for it, then I'll send my thank yous to those that I had a relationship with in that hiring process. But yeah, after each interview though, personally I haven't done that. But you should at least say thank you at the very least after you hear back from them, I'd imagine, to maintain a relationship.
Common practice, Bini. This is something you're gonna have to learn. Common practice is say thank you after every interview. Because that could, if between you and somebody that didn't say thank you, I'm probably gonna think, oh, this guy's polite. He thanked me for my time.
Or they're sucking up to me. I don't know. That's good.
Well, that's sales engineering, my friend. You're gonna have to suck up to some people.
I suppose. It'll help you.
If this is if this is their game, like this is the extent of their suck up game, I'll take it, man. I'd rather just have someone who says thank you over someone who doesn't.
Fair enough. I mean,
Bini.
you're thankful during the call itself, just like you're being nice and like cordial during the call. After the fact, then send out a whole new email to be, hey, like thanks again for the time and like a great conversation, and I'm just reiterating everything I just said on the call. And
you don't have to reiterate anything. Just, hey man, I appreciate the time you took to chat with me. I hope to hear back from you soon. That's it. But that's just me. I'm the blunt guy, right? You're the mouthy guy, the business guy who likes to talk for half hours. So that's why you dread sending that email.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, you're wrong, and moving on. Number 7, not actually wanting the job. Right. I do recommend people practice interviewing, but at least be curious about the job. If you're not gonna take the job no matter what, I wouldn't waste your time because it's gonna show and it's gonna reflect badly on you.
Potentially, actually, and not to like just to be a like just, yeah. I say potentially only because I have had one experience in the past where there were, I guess, there was one job. I was working in a job and I was interviewing for a few others, and I realized like partway through the interview process that it wasn't a job that I necessarily would want to see myself in. Also, considering it was my bottom pick of some other jobs I was interviewing for, and I was doing really well with those other interviews as well. And I kind of just kept it going just for the experience of kind of seeing like I don't really want this job straight up, but I do kind of want to like learn more about like get better at interviews. So it's good interview practice. You may seem like you may feel like you're wasting their time, but I don't know. I think it's a good experience. Just kind of go through it, learn more about an industry, grow some contacts. I ended up getting an offer from them that ended up declining, and so like I don't know. I like you don't want the job.
Let me put it to you this way. If you didn't have the other interviews, would you have wanted that job? Would you have taken that job?
Just in order, potentially, but I would have been looking for other interviews like all the while anyways, though.
But you would have taken the job. That's what like if you don't want the job at all, like there is room for practice, but at least be interested in kind of what they do. You realize midway through the interview process that you don't enjoy it, and maybe for you weren't inexperienced. You needed that experience, and for interviews. But if I'm going to interview for a job that I don't want, I just don't have time for it, right? And I'll be wasting not just their time, I'll be wasting my time, right? Time that I could be using to do something better, right? Creating my own blog about interview processes, for example. And you can always use your time to do something differently. And once you've done like 3 or 4 interviews throughout your career, we don't do interviews as much as we should, generally speaking, but that's not our job. But once you've done 2 or 3, and if you're a sales engineering and you're meeting with customer after customer, every time you meet with a customer, that's kind of an interview. So if you go talk to a hiring manager, it's the same thing. You really don't need that much practice. But I get it.
I was gonna say, I think that perspective is really strong too. That idea, like as you are more experienced, kind of the value or your time is definitely more valuable, and also, yeah, you just don't need that experience as much. I would definitely be far more inclined to do that. Certainly in my younger days, and as a student, for sure. Take all the interviews you can, get all the experience you can, just in that room. And you know what? Even when you get that offer, if for a job you don't want, it's a pretty dope confidence boost. Like now you kind of could go into other interviews, like that for jobs you actually do want, knowing that, you know what, I have the skills and I was marketable enough for a company to actually want me for something else. And you could go into future interviews with that behind you. But more so for younger people, I suppose, yeah, if you're a little bit more experienced and you have gone through the gamut a little bit with interviews, don't waste your time right there. It's just good point.
Well, 2 things that you kind of point out. One, you are more desirable if you already have a job. Like, it's, I don't know why that is, but if you have a job, that means he must be a good employee, so we like him or her.
Applies to everything, actually.
Yeah. Like I was gonna give an example about girlfriends, but not for this podcast. And then there's the other thing is, then that's not English, but anyways, the other thing is, you are not as desperate for jobs if you already have a job. You can choose not to do an interview, but if you don't have a job, do every interview you can to get a job, and then you can be picky. So
it's that's kind of a cool point too. I know, so we've been on a lot of little tangents here and there, but kind of a cool point. Interviewing for a job you don't want does kind of give you like that feeling, or gets you familiar with the feeling of not being stressed about it, I suppose. Like if you're somebody that is actually super stressed during all interviews, interview for a job you don't really care for, and like then you'll at least have a benchmark for how comfortable you can feel in an interview, for whenever you kind of get into an interview for something you do want.
Yeah, like I say, kind of like if you want to work for AWS, you might want to interview for a couple of other companies that you may not want the job, like it's not your end goal, but you're okay working there. But if you lose the job, you're not crying about it. Right? So you can practice. So when you get to AWS, now you're doing the interview and you've already practiced, you're acing it. Right. Like the first interview I had with a company called RIM, Research in Motion, the makers of BlackBerry. And one of the questions they asked, I guess that's mistake number 11, bonus mistake number 11. It's not understanding the reason behind the question. They asked me like, hey, how do you choose your phone? And talking about like not knowing when to shut up, or like making jokes and not knowing when to stop, which is mistake number 12. I told them, it makes calls. And I never heard back from them again. So the next time I did an interview and they asked me similar questions, I like the way it looks, the functions, and then how fast it is. And I just listed everything and I figured out that's the reason they're asking me the question. So have I not done the RIM interview initially, I would not have figured out. I may have lost on a better deal because, well, the better deal was with Nortel, which also went bankrupt. So I don't know.
All the experience in the most part,
All right, number 8. We've been kind of doing this quite a bit today. Is not telling stories. We've been telling stories all the time, quite a bit today, and you get a lot of behavioral questions, especially as a sales engineer, because they want to know how you deal with people. Like, how have you dealt with this difficult person, or what do you do if your account manager says something incorrect in front of the customers? And the best way to answer those is to actually tell stories, not to tell them what you would do, but tell stories of what you've done in the past.
Couldn't agree more. I wonder, like, I'm sure there's an expression around this already. I'm not looking this up or anything. I haven't done this beforehand, but like, you know how they say that a story can tell, like a story's worth 1,000 words or whatever.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I'm an idiot. Well, a story, I think, is worth 1,000 other stories. In that
a story is worth 1,000 pictures.
Perhaps,
so, 1,000 times 1,000, that's 1,000,000. There you go. Is it 1,000,000?
1,000 times 1,000. I don't know, whatever it is. It's a lot. It's a lot of stories. There are a lot of words there, because you, like, by telling a story, a situational example about something, you're telling an interviewer not only showing how well you could articulate something, but also you're able to give them insights towards your behaviors in certain situations, and perhaps others, and how you reacted to those things. And so telling stories is so powerful. And we always talk about how powerful storytelling is.
Yeah.
Yeah, great tip for an interview.
Yep. And I guess mistake number 9 is not practicing those stories ahead of time.
That's so important.
It's hard to come up with a story on the spot. So just take some time, write down, Google whatever behavioral questions you want, and talk about how you've converted a customer from a hater to a lover, or how you dealt with this angry customer, or how you've dealt with a colleague that's a bit of a diva. You know, write those down, like how you solved problems in the past, how you've closed more than everybody else. Just write it down and put in emotions, because emotions actually sell more than facts. So yeah.
And also too, like, at least when those questions are asked as a spur of a moment question, you haven't necessarily prepared them beforehand, unless you have a number of canned stories that you have just practiced throughout your life. Things will get mixed up in your head a little bit just on the fly. Like, different stories will kind of meld together, and you'll start to talk about one thing that like had a certain point around it. Then you'll maybe just inadvertently mix something up and kind of introduce a different story that was slightly related. But then all of a sudden, if you start to backtrack, or like you start to maybe kind of pretend that those two situations were just one situation, you might say something that points out the fact that you might not be entirely truthful. And if the more wishy-washy you may seem by saying, oh no, wait, that's something else, or hang on, let me start over, or whatever, might make them seem that you're just making this up on the spot, as opposed to just, remembering stories. So definitely prepare those stories, because they can get mixed up with other things. And the more articulate you are about it, and the more poignant you are about answering the question that they asked, just the more effective that entire experience will be.
And I think I had a conversation on the forums a while back with Diana Capello. Congrats, by the way, Diana, for your baby. And we talked about like telling stories. Is it okay to tell the same story over and over? And yes, it is okay, because you're not dealing with the same interviewer or customer all the time. And the more you say it, the more practice you get, the more you know how to, like, if there's punchline, the more you know how to say it. If it's like emotional, you know what you say to tweak emotionally. So yeah, use those stories. You're going to use them as a SE anyways. You're going to use them in your daily life to tell stories about fun stuff you've done. Just use stories.
Well, and something you mentioned there too, we mentioned punchline, something that kind of maybe made this seem more natural, the idea of practicing a story, because some may say, practicing a story, aren't stories supposed to be a natural thing? Like, aren't you coming off as kind of disingenuous if you practice it beforehand, or whatever it may be? But really, no, because like what you said there with the punchline is really important, because comedians, for me, stand-up comedians, they always seem so natural, just telling whatever story they are. And you know what tends to be, at least in my opinion, or my taste for jokes, like sometimes long-winded story-based jokes are really funny and work really well. But what I didn't necessarily realize about comedy and the most successful stand-up comics, and surely those that are not as successful as well, is that every word, every mannerism, every inflection, or whatever it may be, is so practiced and crafted that they go over these things over and over and over and over and over again, so that they are so effective, and so that they do eventually land when the jokes come out. And so you're really doing yourself a disservice by not practicing these stories beforehand, because to get hired by this company, to be a professional, you may as well be a professional in the interview, to be able to show them rather what you've got. So yes, definitely practice your stories and practice them well.
I agree 100%. I was going to give the comedian example, and you stole it from me. I don't like you right now, but hey, great minds think alike. All right. Mistake number 10, which is, like, although we're talking about the 10 non-common interview mistakes, this is not our last mistake of the day. Mistake number 10 is not asking for feedback after the fact, as in after you've lost a job or you've won the job. But generally speaking, that's easier to ask for. But hiring managers want to tell you why you didn't get the job, whether you suck or you did great, but there was somebody who has a little bit more certification than you, or somebody who knows the technology a little bit more than you, or you bombed on the demo. So ask for feedback, so the next time you do an interview, you can actually fix the problem. Otherwise, it might be just wondering what the problem was. It's a debrief. It's kind of like doing a demo at a customer, and they say no, and you're wondering why they didn't like what I showed them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, feedback's important. It can be hard to hear sometimes, but you'll only get stronger for it. And yeah, I can't. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. Well, SEs need to be coachable, right? If you can't hear feedback from a hiring manager who's generally a little bit more uh, nicer than customers, you might not have a good time being a sales engineer. Because I've literally, as a sales engineer, I've sat down on a chair behind one of my customers and listened to him, and that's in my previous job. Listened to him complain for like an hour about how crappy our product is, whether he's right or not, and I had to take notes, right, and then relay that information. I didn't agree on most of them. It's like, oh, I want a button here, but it's there. It's like 2 inches away. Just write it down and send it back. And if you don't accept the feedback that the hiring manager gave you, it's really up to you. Do with it what you will, but you have to ask for feedback. I believe you have to ask for feedback because they made their decision based on those. And yeah, you can fix it for the next time, whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah, once you get good at asking for feedback, once you're comfortable with what they give, comfortable with whatever feedback you get, just a better person you'll be all around your life, but professionally especially for sure. I found that asking for feedback, regardless of the situation, it can't be a bad thing. Really, you might hear something you don't want to hear, but it'll only make you better in the long run.
Yeah. All right. So last bonus, I've already mentioned the other two bonus ones, is not understanding the reason behind the question, knowing when to shut up. You know, I should have shut up when they asked me that question of what do you like in the phone, because I was making jokes with them and they were laughing and I took it too far. So I didn't know when to shut up. You mentioned you did something similar as well, right?
Yeah, I had an interview with someone that I don't know. I was pretty like I thought it went. I thought it was going to be a pretty fun interview. Like every other interview leading up to this one was awesome. And this was the final interview with the VP that was coming in from New York. And yeah, I kind of was myself, which I thought was important, or which I still think is very important to do. And cracked a few jokes that didn't land. I don't know if maybe she just didn't get them. So I tried some other things here and there. Never really did. None of these things really landed. And yeah, I found out after the fact. Also, never got that job, though I felt very weird about it afterwards. Found out after the fact that she wasn't really much of a joker, and I should have really read the room and know, again, I should have known to shut up after the first few amazing jokes didn't land. That should have been a clear sign right then and there. But yeah, no, definitely know when to shut up and just know your audience in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to crack jokes, but I've realized that not everybody likes jokes. So if I do one, they don't laugh, I kind of slow down and do one really later. If they don't laugh, I'm done. I'm done making jokes. I'm still courteous. I'm still amiable, I guess, as part of my personality, it seems. But I don't make as many jokes. Last one of the day is not having an interview funnel, as in you're in sales, you're trying to sell yourself. You can't have one deal in the funnel and expect it to close. You're going to have multiple ones, and one of them would close. And if multiple ones close, that's a good problem to have. You can pick and choose whichever one you want. But if you have one and doesn't close, you're screwed. You're going to have to go. You can't wait till you're done an interview to go look for the next one, because you're going to spend a lot of time waiting in between interviews. So just keep them coming. Even if you have an interview coming up, keep looking for jobs if that's what you want, really. If the interview is just happening because a recruiter is reaching out and you're curious, that's a different story. But if you're looking for a job, actively looking for a job, fill up your funnel with interviews and opportunities. Create a CRM for yourself, either Excel spreadsheet or Trello or your brain, if that's what you like to use. I try not to, and go from there. What do you think, Bini?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, this is like I hate writing resumes. I hate writing cover letters, and generally just hate applying for jobs in general. So I'll try to be as efficient as possible with respect to only applying for jobs that I truly see myself. This is in the most part, true applying for jobs that I truly like see myself being a part of and really wanting to work for. So I'll admit my funnel is never really that big at a time, but it's also never just one job either, because you're so right. I mean, a couple of things actually. One of which is that nothing is more demoralizing than going through the whole process of writing a whole cover letter and writing a whole resume, customizing it to whatever the job is, going through a couple of interviews, seeing yourself in that role, because every interview you get closer to, You always see yourself a little bit more in that role, and then getting rejected and then having to start at ground zero again with a whole new opportunity is the worst. So having a few on the go is definitely very helpful, but also from a confidence perspective, just like knowing that you're in an interview, knowing that you have another one on the go as well.
Exactly.
Just you can't go wrong.
Yeah, cause if you finish an interview and you have nothing after that, it's like, what now? I'm gonna have to restart. But if you just finished the first interview process and you have 3 more in the horizon, like, all right, we'll just move it on. Right? There's a big difference, and that's why you have to keep your funnel going. Because even if you've done 3, 4, 5 and you didn't get them, keep your funnel going. Because as long as you have a little bit more, you're not as desperate as you would think. It is hard being rejected. And maybe you should figure out why you're being rejected, which is why you ask for feedback. But yeah.
And lots of great posts up there, a lot of great resources with respect to finding jobs. And sometimes too, if in the meantime you need to kind of spread your wings a little bit and maybe look for jobs outside of, let's say, sales engineering, just for the sake of an example, and you start looking at like business analyst roles or something that have a lot of the same skills but are a little bit different, but there's more of those roles out there. Apply to some of those too, and it'll at least make you feel good when you kind of get into this interview processes with these other jobs, even if they're not the dream job that you want to have, could at least get you closer to that dream job that you do eventually want to have.
Yeah, like if you're an SE, maybe look for a sales job, even if you don't want that, mainly because if you do get it and you get to walk a mile in their shoes, you can still look for other jobs at the same time. And it will make you a better sales engineer because you know what it takes to be on the other side. All right. We usually ask the not so fire round, but we don't have one. So let me ask you this. Is there a book you're reading recently?
Is there a book I'm reading? No, actually, I haven't been reading a book. I haven't read a book in a long time, actually.
Jeez.
No, honestly, yeah, I've been playing guitar mostly. Been reading a lot into like my space, I guess, like about the product that I work in.
MySpace? Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, no, like the building space, I suppose. Yeah, no books as of late. I've been cooking a lot. That's been good.
Are you using a recipe book or are you just making up your own?
Kind of just use the internet. Like I'll see what I have on hand, and like if I have a certain protein, I'll kind of like figure out a recipe around that protein, and I'll look online for recipes around that protein and whatever else I have. And I have a million grocery stores like a 10-minute walk away from me, so I'll go for a little adventure and get stuff and make stuff. But been going pretty well as of late.
Okay, nice.
How about you?
I just finished a couple weeks back. I finished the book called "The Courage to Be Disliked." I think it was suggested on here. It was interesting. It's very philosophical.
Interesting. Big takeaway. Big takeaways.
Yeah, like I didn't really agree 100% with the message of the book. Like I think it's very utopian. Like in the end, you're doing everything for the community, and the community is the world, not like it's just maybe people should read it themselves and make up their own mind. I just feel it's too utopian, like everybody's going to live in harmony. I just didn't like that, which is kind of weird by the term "the courage to be disliked." I figured out like, hey, it's going to teach me how to be a a-hole. not about living in harmony. But yeah, that's the book. But right now I'm kind of it turns out my certification's expired because it's been a few years since I've done my certifications at Nokia Alcatel-Lucent, and because I was using my work email at the time, I never got an email saying that they've expired after I've left. So I'm working on CCNA, like Cisco certification, starting from scratch. Kind of sucks, but considering I already know all this stuff and I have to repeat them, but it is what it is. Get my certifications back.
Yeah, go get it. I'm sure it's a little bit easier this time around too, since you already know a lot of the stuff that you need for it.
Yeah, like there's a bit of new stuff, but it's like I'm watching the videos. Like, yeah, I know this, skip this. I know this, skip this. So maybe it'll go faster. And I'm kind of putting myself out there right now, telling people that I'm doing this, so that in a couple of months, if I don't have my CCNA, people can start laughing at me.
Good sis. I won't hold you to it.
I'm not sure how to do the tests right now with everything locked down. I think that we're gonna go into a third lockdown right now in Ottawa. Anyways,
Ontario, I think we're getting shut down for another month.
Yep. What do you like about sales engineering?
What do I like about sales engineering? I think you kind of described a little bit earlier around it's just it's a marrying of so many different types of roles and skills that you could apply to so many other things as well. It's kind of cool to be able to play that role, like to be that technical salesperson, not have like be as technical as you want to be. You can be super technical or just slightly, I guess you can't be not technical per se. But then from a sales perspective too, you know, you could be as personable as you need to be or as personable as you want to be, given that it's more. So I think it's because it could be whatever you want, and it kind of marries that idea of being technical but also personable. That's what I like about it.
Okay. Did you just say you? Yeah. I don't know, solving problems, man. Solving like the human and the technical problems. Marrying the two has always been fun. Yeah. For me, that pretty much it. Not. Well, what else is in the not so fire? What do you like? What do you dislike?
Tools and
I,
like what separates the best from the not?
what was that?
What separates the great ones from the not? I guess we can talk about dislike per se, but
I
also
think. Go ahead.
time-wise, are we okay? By the way, I don't know. We've been going on for probably more than an hour or about an hour.
Yeah. All right. Let's call it a day. Come back next week to hear the rest of our not so fire round answers.
Yeah.
Just make up our own stuff. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to us talk for the last hour, I think. And thanks, Benny, for pointing out that it's been an hour. Check out the course if you're interested, if you want to become an SE or you're interested in mastering your sales engineering techniques. And we will see you next time.
Well, also let us know if we missed anything. If there are other cool interview, like not so common interview mistakes that people are making out there, or some cool tips that you, or uncommon tips even that you think people should know about, let us know. Let us share it with the crew, with the community, and I'll be better for it.
Yeah. For example, shave your face. For Ramsey, this is Benny signing off. Wait, for Benny, this is Ramsey signing off.